beginning, there was nothing. Or almost nothing. Nothing other than Thoth. Now, Thoth was a god who was terrified of loneliness and the dark. So he decided to create light. Then, like every self-respecting but bored god, Thoth invented a world of mortals. He created Earth. On this Earth, he implanted the first living creatures, trees. He gave them a vast, fertile Garden of Eden, the plains of the Maasai Mara in East Africa. Here, on this earthly paradise, the trees multiplied. Acacias, cumbis, redwithes and balsams soon formed a uniform green belt. All these trees grew up together, side by side, with one exception, a solitary fig tree. This one took root near the Talek River, which flowed at Thoth's will. It was a tree without equal in majesty and could be seen from afar. The biggest tree in the Maasai Mara, it had a trunk 6 meters in circumference to support the weight of several tons of branches. And, like every fig tree in the Maasai Mara, it had its own fruit-bearing cycle. But very quickly, Thoth grew tired of admiring his plantations. Their stillness bored him, so he created animals. The animals had the ability to move about, much more entertaining, and Thoth even hit on the idea of giving the animals the still plants to feed on. That way, everything was taken care of. Or so Thoth thought. But he'd forgotten about a certain animal, covered in hair from head to toe, except for its hands and muzzle. There's no doubt about it. It was an animal Thoth had created in his own image. A monkey, the Anubis baboon, the being Thoth wanted to be perfect, but its creation was quite an adventure. Thoth's first baboon creation was a 20-year-old male. Let's call him Alpha. Convinced that, like himself, his creation was terrified of being alone, Thoth immediately provided him with not one, but several females. 70 centimeters tall and weighing 30 kilograms, Alpha is twice as imposing as his companions. However, his physique doesn't mean that he's the patriarch. In fact, it's the females and their offspring who form the tribe's nucleus. The males protect and fertilize the females at the females' disposition. And so it was, as Thoth willed. But the females aren't exclusively for Alpha. He has to share them. And these two, 6-year-old Homos and 8-year-old Molos, want a piece of the action. They're already looking for a place in the adult male hierarchy, which spells trouble for baboon politics. But we'll come to that later. For now, Thoth must spend 1 or 2 of his divine days teaching his cherished creatures the art of living. He gives them a tree as their chief habitat. Not just any old tree, but the Maasai Mara's giant fig tree. It's a place where they can meet, sleep, and use as a lookout post. The baboons like their tree so much that they're only driven from it by hunger. In the morning, the first to start feeling peckish gives the signal, and the others follow. As soon as the canopy's tenants have left, the occupants of the two lower levels appear. First are the ants. They feed on the dead bark. The lizard comes out to reheat his cold blood in the morning sun. Further down, a rat lives in the fig tree's root labyrinth. Meanwhile, the baboons are on the move along the riverbed. It has almost dried up, but its banks are a precious store, providing bulbs, roots and tubers, the baboon's main food source. The adults stuff themselves while the young play, knowing that after their mothers have eaten, well, it will be their turn. Reedbuck have impressive antlers which are particularly effective for chasing unwelcome visitors, but there's no danger for the baboons. Thoth wanted the Maasai Mara to be a permanent oasis, and so it was. The still plants are in sufficient number and variety for the region's inhabitants to have their fill almost all the year round. There's no feeding competition either between the monkeys and this bird, the saddlebill stork or jabiru. In fact, the baboons live in harmony with all the vegetarians of the Maasai Mara, even the elephants. The baboons' search for food takes them to the opposite riverbank, far from the fig tree. They wander about the vast marshy plains, the feeding place of all sorts of other herbivores. For pulling up grass and unearthing bulbs, the baboons have a number of techniques that they can use simultaneously: the fingers, especially the thumb, the fingernails, teeth, and lips. The young acquire this know-how by mimicking the adults. The baboons take their time eating, so much so that they've spent 6 hours of their first day of existence feeding, and it will always be so. At the end of the afternoon, Alpha gives the signal to leave, the feast is over, and it's back to the fig tree for the troop. Thoth doesn't lose any time himself in falling into a blissful sleep, safe in the knowledge that he has created the perfect world. On Earth, too, it's time for bed. Darkness falls and all the members of Alpha's troop are settled in for the night. Each one chooses a branch and a comfortable spot. Baboons sleep for about 8 hours a night in 2-hour cycles. Just as well, because like Thoth, they are terrified of darkness and have very poor night vision. While most of the troop sleep, a few females who are suckling stay on guard. Up until now, everything is going well for the baboons. But one fine morning, Thoth woke up with a furious craving for figs. Bursting with goodness, the fruit of the most beautiful tree in the Maasai Mara is at last ripe. Thoth has been jealously guarding these figs for a long time, and they are forbidden to all mortals. To ensure his wishes are respected, Thoth has dispatched an emissary to Earth. The divine guardian is the same colour as the forbidden fruits. His name is Green Mamba. A camouflage ace with mortal venom. In some, he's a dissuasive character. Thoth knows Green Mamba's operating instructions. Leave to heat for several seconds in the morning sun. When its cold blood has attained ambient temperature, it's capable of detecting any suspect movements. and just a few minutes later, its forked tongue can capture odours floating in the air. This is how you obtain a green mamba fit to kill outright any fig-loving baboons. The baboons are not aware of Thoth's plans, but they're instinctively mistrustful of all animals who don't enter the category eater of still plants. Still, they just can't resist the temptation of the ripe figs, so they try to distance themselves from this strange animal who tries to pass himself off as a vegetable. The youngest don't know how to get rid of the slithery killjoy. But Alpha has developed a safe and efficient method. Once the serpent has been forgotten, Alpha can enjoy the forbidden fruits in peace. But what is written is written. Alpha should have known not to mess with divine injunctions, but the temptation was too much. All those juicy figs. And now the whole troop has started stuffing itself. No holds barred. Celestial fury descends progressively upon Earth. For each fig plucked, eaten, or spoilt, the anger of Thoth gathers force over the savanna. Frightened by the menacing sky, the youngest leave the extremities of the branches and take refuge near the trunk. But Alpha isn't intimidated, and he carries on eating regardless, provoking Thoth to open the gates of the heavens. Torrential rain begins to pour on the Maasai Mara. It will continue every day at dusk for 2 months, because it was Thoth, after all, who invented the calendar and the seasons. The first season is the short, rainy season. It has been raining throughout November and December. The Talek River has filled its bed, cutting the plains in two and making life difficult for the baboons. The baboons were accustomed to crossing the river on foot in search of food, and now they'll have to find another way across. Once again, Alpha's experience should help them to find a solution to the problem. In fact, the clouds of Thoth's anger had a silver lining, as the rains have brought tender shoots up from the fertile soil. There's no need anymore to travel far and wide to find food, and the young baboons profit from their extra leisure time to invent a new game. The whole savanna enjoys the results of Thoth's outburst. As the baboons explored their renewed pastures, they distanced themselves from their habitual fig tree neighbourhood. And a solitary elephant makes the most of their absence to gather some burgeoning green branches. Nearby, all sorts of herbivores savour the tender new grass. And not far away, some termites are also making the most of the changes to their environment. The rain showers have broken up the soil, enabling them to build their earthen cathedrals. The savanna's profile will soon take on a new form when the work of these labourers is completed in a few days' time. The rains have stopped, and the humid heat begins to reduce the river flow. It becomes almost stagnant. The rat, the fig tree's garden tenant, has been waiting for this moment for a long time. The tiny water droplets suspended in the air transport tempting odours. There's definitely a smell of nuts, but there's a meaty smell too, and his nose doesn't let him down. It was exactly what he was hoping for, a xylophage beetle larva. The dead wood that these larvae have been consuming gives off the nutty odour. With its cutting incisors and rasping molars, the rat's teeth are perfectly adapted for its omnivorous diet. Once it's been crushed, the larva will be gulped down in a few minutes. The rat appears to be very hygienic, but there's more to it than that. It has to get rid of the nut smell trapped in its fur before it can sniff out more prey. The tempting nut odour also reaches Alpha and his troops' nostrils. The baboons have returned to the vicinity of their fig tree. The dead acacia branches have been softened by the rain, allowing xylophage larvae to dig new tunnels. The smell of this still plant is enough to give a vegetarian mobile animal a taste for carnivorous things. Alpha exercises his right of precedence. Then the young follow, imitating him in their own manner. But hierarchy obliges them to give up their place when another adult comes along. All this place-swapping is rather disturbing for the other branch occupants, the ants. They had made their latest home here, but the news gets round quickly that it's time for immediate removal. The scouts get their information from their antennae, and they're insistent. There are no other emergency exit tunnels within the branch, so the move has to be made by the exterior, under guard of the soldiers. Oh, and bypassing, if possible, the hairy, non-identified objects. Unlike figs, larvae are not forbidden food, so what has brought the green mamba to the neighbourhood? Well, it's not the baboons, but a potential prey, a lizard. Faced with this elite killing machine, the only chance the lizard has of escaping is to camouflage himself in the grass. The trick has smothered his tracks. Confused, the serpent doesn't know which way to look. And watch carefully, because there's about to be an incredible reversal in this situation. snake is slowly asphyxiated. Thoth is furious. He's just lost his most precious secret agent. He orders a great rainy season, a downpour without precedent. When the celestial gates close again, all the baboons can do is observe the extent of the damage. Water has invaded everything. The Talek River has spilt over its banks onto the neighbouring plains, and as the ground is already saturated, the overflowing water ends up back in the river. In these conditions, it's not even worth looking for a crossing. Some strange mobile creatures have appeared since the flood, and they don't seem at all vegetarian. To get across to the other side, the only solution is a huge leap. Following Alpha's lead, the whole troop makes the leap, while risking a fall which could end them up in the crocodile's jaws. The problem with jumps from a high to a low point is that backtracking becomes impossible. The rains have transformed the Talek River into an insurmountable barrier, and Alpha and his troop must start on a quest for a new tree. Unfortunately, the baboons can't always choose where they'll land. The acacia tree, full of thorns, leaves very bad memories. Some of the females must have been impressed by Alpha's acrobatics. Swollen pink hindquarters and languorous looks mean they're on heat, and they don't hide their interest in the adult males. Alpha has already given in to this one's advances, to another female's great displeasure. Coupling is brief but frequent in baboons. Did you say lust? One day, Thoth decided to play a trick on his creatures. He sent his collection of ticks to Earth. Passed on from one baboon to the next, the blood-sucking parasites soon spread through the whole troop. Even by scratching conscientiously, it's impossible to get rid of them. The baboons have to help each other out. Gradually, mutual tick removal becomes inscribed as an important ritual in baboon social relationships. Often the highest placed in the hierarchy are groomed by the lower ranking, like Alpha here, who's enjoying the attentions of one of his companions. The females obviously take pleasure in grooming their young, and each other. It seems the troop knows how to turn all Thoth's tricks to their own advantage. Now that they've made the jump and found themselves on the other side of the river, the baboons have to find a tree to spend the night in. Back at the fig tree, intense activity is going on in the troop's absence. A colony of safari ants has set up a bivouac in a waterlogged soil at the foot of the tree. The army is on campaign and preparing a ruthless raid. The first find, an excrement dating from the solitary elephant's last visit. Not very interesting at a first glance, but the question has to be more deeply explored. The safari ants know that underneath the droppings, other underground specialists are drilling tunnels to supply their nests. Gangs of safari ants attack the termites. The termite corpses are deposited in a designated place. Once all the tunnels have been cleaned out, the ants gather together again in cohort formation to bring the spoils back to the bivouac. We know that ants can carry material up to 4 times their own weight, but the safaris look as if they're trying to beat the record. Perhaps it's military ardour which excites them. A few kilometres away, on the bank of the Tarlik, Alpha's troop is still looking for a new tree. In their search, they come across the creatures who invaded the river. From the looks of their teeth and their powerful bodies, they definitely aren't still plant eaters. Alpha decides to move away from these croc-infested waters and begin prospecting in the forest instead. In the underwood, the baboons meet a herd of impalas. These vulnerable animals are often found in the company of warthogs, whose intense aggression comes between the impalas and lurking predators. Like this hyena, for example. The warthogs stop grazing the still plants to form a dissuasive barrier and send the hyena back where it came from. Simple and efficient. Perhaps because of this, Alpha himself feels safe in this clearing. He just has to find a tree. All the trees look the same, and none of them is big enough to host 40 baboons. For once, the troop won't be able to sleep together tonight. They'll have to split up. For safety reasons, the youngest gather round Alpha, where they can play without danger and come to an agreement as to who's sleeping where in the new dormitory. Each one eventually finds a place, but before falling asleep, Alpha and the other adult males locate each other's positions in the canopy. In the darkness of the night, they stay in vocal contact. The next day, an early riser wakes up his sleeping companions and persuades them to get down from their tree. But what can they do in the early morning fog except wait for the others to wake up? The last up seem to be anxious to explore. On the whole, Alpha's troop seems to be getting along well. Up until now, they've found a way of resolving their problems, got round difficulties, and bypassed risks. How about a peaceful life now? No such luck. Thoth is still sore and dissatisfied with the rains, floods, and ticks. He decides to sow discord in the savannah. If there's a fight spoiling, Homos is always around. Facing him is his elder brother, Molos, and Molos is thirsty for power. His intimidating behavior gives away his ambition to usurp Alpha. Alpha doesn't want to get involved, but he watches the family squabbles carefully. To avoid fighting, Alpha craftily holds a youngster next to him, for the little one's protection, but also as a shield. Molos makes the first charge, but is not very insistent. Baboons prefer to use dissuasive force before coming to blows. Homos dodges the attack, and now it's his turn to provoke Alpha. But Alpha remains neutral. Molos, however, still needs to vent his aggression, so he turns on his brother. Homos knows he's not going to win this battle against his older and heavier brother. Instead, he suggests forming an alliance with him against other members of the troop. It's agreed. But the other baboons prefer to flee from these two troublemakers. All that's left for them to do is to try to challenge Alpha again. He still hasn't moved. They'd really like a good old scrap, but Alpha has seen it all before. Molos can raise his eyebrows, Homos bare his teeth. Their provocations leave him cold. In frustration, Molos sets out again after Homos. Molos wins in a victory of strength over cunning. Homos took a nasty fall from the top of the tree, and the only thing he can do now is to count his battle wounds. A damaged wrist, no question of taking part in a coalition against the youngest now. And with his left cheek pouch ripped, it's going to be a while before he can chew normally. They're only superficial injuries and don't put his life in danger. However, as he lost the fight, he can no longer oust Molos. From now on, he'll have to submit to his brother's authority. There's no doubt about it from the way Molos is showing off. He's decided to make the most of his superiority. But there's a law in baboon society that will bring him down a peg or two. The lower members in the hierarchy must present their hindquarters to the highest place to be, shall we say, inspected. It's somewhat humiliating. With all that's been happening, the troop hasn't had a single meal. So it's time for Alpha to move them along and lead them to a feeding ground. Contrary to habit, as if he had a premonition, Alpha decides to leave the youngest in the clearing near their tree and set off ahead as a scout. The troop of young mothers walks through the plains under the orders of their first lady. Alpha is reassured. He knows that these eaters of still plants mean no harm. The troop can come and feed here. But where are they? They ought to be at the edge of the wood, waiting for a signal from him. There must have been some sort of misunderstanding, because on the other side, the troop appear to be waiting for him to come and get them. Eventually, it's Molos who takes the initiative to lead the troop to the meadow. Alpha seems to know that Molos won't be long in ousting him. But for the time being, the young and the females aren't willing to change their habits. They catch up with Alpha for their daily feast. Even with his experience, there are some things which leave Alpha perplexed, such as Molos's behaviour. For several days now, he seems to have had one thing in mind, getting to the top of the social ladder, and yet here he is, presenting his hindquarters to show his submission. Suspicious, Alpha refuses to get involved in Molos's tricks. And the message is clear. When a baboon turns his back on you, it's because he doesn't want anything to do with you. Politics is complicated among Thoth's creatures. The borders are often blurred between dominant and dominated. In young males, the desire to gain power is often stronger than anything. Molus has conquered Alpha, a victory of brutality over wisdom. Molus is delighted to have finally achieved his goal, and to make sure everyone knows he's in charge now, he doesn't hesitate to terrorize the other members of the troop. The other adults attempt to form timid alliances to confront him. Only faced with such pointed arguments, it's difficult to remain resolved. Molus feels perfectly comfortable with his status of great adult male. In fact, he's already dreaming about the privileges reserved for those of his position, and he doesn't have anything to fear, as he appears to be about the only worthy candidate. The others are not a pretty sight. Homer still has a hole in his cheek, Alpha is rather the worst for wear, and even this complete nobody has been a victim of the despot. August. It hasn't rained for 2 months. Thoth has been sticking scrupulously to his calendar. It's the long, dry season. The herbivores have no other pastures than these yellow fields. In their outings on the plain, the baboons meet a proficient hunter, the cheetah. The cheetah rarely approaches zebras because they have an annoying habit of defending themselves with their hooves. This is perhaps why the baboons don't stray far from them. The cheetah's principal victims are Thompson's gazelles, and this female and her 3 sons already have their eye on them. The mother hunts alone for her hungry youngsters. By approaching upwind, she's sure not to alert the gazelles, who have a very fine sense of smell. The rest is merely a question of speed, and we already know that the cheetah is a world champion in this discipline. very low-cut nostrils enable the cheetah to catch her breath while she asphyxiates her prey. It's dinner time for the 3 young cheetahs, provided they manage to find their mother in the tall grass. Well, well, it's the baboons, with Mollis leading the way to the scene of the crime. The first on the spot are the cheetahs, but Mollis, still as aggressive, seems to have decided to argue over their spoils. It's a rare sight in the savannah, a handful of baboons trying to scare off 4 cheetahs. However, the cheetahs don't seem quite ready to give up their turf, and in spite of repeated baboon attacks, they resist. The fight equals out, but in bungling confusion. In the end, Mollis's determination wins over the whole troop, and confronted by such unanimity, the felines capitulate. In the confusion, the gazelle has been dissected and dispersed all over the place. The baboons will have to glean the pieces of flesh from here and there. Mollis has awarded himself the lion's share, the gazelle's belly. The others will have to make do with the legs. Baboons are also carnivorous and don't miss an occasion to eat meat, so long as they don't have to hunt for it, of course. So much for the harmony that Thoth willed. Because, meanwhile, some animals have been left out. The young and the female baboons still haven't had their share, and neither have the cheetahs. They're going to try their luck a little further away. Without rain, the still plant-eaters have literally shorn the plains. Mollis and his group decide they've had enough of their exile. The Talek River has returned to its bed. The baboons can now cross it and reach their cherished fig tree, the most beautiful tree in the Maasai Mara. As they approach, enthusiasm overcomes discipline as everyone looks for a shortcut to cross the cliffs dug out by the last flood. And everyone seems to manage. Well, almost everyone. They have to move fast because night's falling. In a year, the fig tree has had time to produce more fruit, much to Mollis's delight. He's the first to arrive, but the others won't be long in turning up. And so, all is well, for the time being.